Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video today. I'm going to be using some products from Spellbinders. This one is called Fabulous Friend, and then I'm also using the Simply Stripes. These are new from the Cardmaker collection. It's been a really long time since I've done any sort of video on skin tones or really with people at all, honestly. Since I mean, a lot of the companies that I work for don't have the peoples. So it's been a long time. But anywho, so I'm going to stamp two of these. We're going to do one with a more traditional Caucasian skin tone, and then we're going to do one with a bit of a darker skin tone, just to show you that there are different options to make your stamp looks different, and then, you know, maybe fit into your recipient better. So I stamped these twice because this is the first time that I've used the stamp, and so I didn't get a great impression the first time because I really don't ever take the time to prep my stamps. If you would like to take the time to prep your stamps, all you really need to do is just hit them with a white eraser and then clean them off. So getting into the coloring, with my Copic coloring, typically what I like to do is I start with my lightest color, work out to my darkest, and then my darkest back into my lightest. Couple of reasons for this. The first one being that if you go in and you lay your shadows down with your lightest color and you have made an error of some sort, which I do, then it's really easy to cover up because it's your lightest color. The second reason that this works for me is because I am one of those people who's very heavy-handed with the first marker that I go in with. So if I go in with my darks to start, then it's going to be very, very dark, which makes it challenging to keep my shadows to a minimum and to have any highlight at all. So in order to be able to conserve my highlight and make sure that my image isn't overly dark, I start with my lightest color. So when you're doing any sort of shading, and we're talking about shadows, you're going to be looking at any point where two objects meet, or where one lays on top of the other. So like she has this beautiful little floral headpiece going on that's laying over her forehead, her sunglasses laying over her face. I also add a little bit of shading underneath her nose. And when I say a little bit, I mean a very little bit. And then her chin is laying over her neck. So all of those are going to have a little bit of a darker area. You might find that my color blend for Caucasian skin looks a little bit dark to begin with, but once you continually keep adding those lighter colors, it will lighten up quite a bit, but you have to have something in there to put in your shadows or it's going to have no dimension. So everybody has different coloring goals when they're coloring. I like to create dimension with my coloring, but if that is not your goal, that's okay too. Or maybe you're not comfortable with super dark colors. Dark colors is what's going to give you contrast. But if you're not comfortable with them, then you can stop with a 3-color blend instead of a 4. Like just you do you and you know when to push your boundaries. So the process for coloring the face with a darker skin tone is exactly the same as it is the first time around. So I just I wanted something that was a little bit warmer. You can do a bunch of different variations, and I actually have a much older video that looks at I think 3 or 4 different skin tones, and I will link that below if you would like to check that out. Maybe you're new to my channel and you haven't seen that one previously, but that one we went through quite a few different skin tones, more yellows, darker and warmer, and everybody's skin tone is different and everybody's skin tone is beautiful, and so maybe, you know, you just need to play around with your markers a little bit. I chose this time around to stick with mostly the E25s, which is a warmer brown. But my lightest color is an E13. I did not like the E23 for my lightest color. It just didn't seem like it fit. I wanted it to be just a smidge warmer than that. But other than just switching out what colors, I'm sorry, the E23 wasn't light enough to like blend everything together. And I don't have a a lighter one than that. I guess I should explain. So that's why I went with the E13, because it matched the 25s fairly well, and it gave me a pretty good blend. So when you're playing around with your colors, like I said, I know I like a 4-color blend, but you may not need that many to get the skin tone that you're trying to achieve. And there's cooler browns, warmer browns, more yellow or less yellow, whatever works for you. Moving on to the sunglasses, I knew when I got the stamp. Like the moment I saw it, I was like, I'm going to do like some sort of sunset or some sort of sun, like a reflection in the glasses as soon as I saw the stamp. And so here I just wanted to keep the frame of the glasses pretty neutral, but I did want to leave a little bit of a highlight to give them, again, that dimension and a little bit of shine. It is very challenging to achieve that on such a small area. And if your colors, like you don't have enough of a highlight, or if your colors maybe bleed out a little bit farther than you would like, don't worry about it. It's not even a thing. Because if you eat up your highlight, we can just go back in and add it with a white gel pen. Several comments have come in recently about my white gel pen. And someone had asked why mine looked so much whiter than theirs. And why it wasn't like drying back. Let's talk about the sunset look in these glasses real quick, and we'll come back to the white gel pen. So I picked a yellow, orange, pink combination. Originally, I was going to go from a Y08 to a YR04, and I felt like I needed a little bit more of a buffer color in there. And then from the R04, I'm going to an RV04. It looks a little bit crazy when I first put it down, but I'm going to use my lighter yellow colors to kind of blend it all together. And then ultimately it looked like it went together. But I really did need that Y38 to make it work. And then I'm just going to kind of cover the whole orange parts and just a little bit of the pink with the Y08. I did go back in with my RV04 just because I felt like I lost a little bit of my pink at the bottom, but I used that lighter yellow color to blend, and it worked out really well. Here, I know that it seems crazy to add some gray shading to somebody's teeth, but if I just leave them stark white while everything else has shading, it will look more strange than adding gray to them. So I just did a C1 and a C3. The C3 was really just in the corners. And I promise you, by the time we are done with the coloring, that they will not look gray. Just hang tight. I gave both girls the same color of lipstick with this RV color family. So I put down the darkest color first this time because it's such a small area. I didn't want to oversaturate it with ink. And so I knew that the chances of me kind of eating up my highlight were fairly good. But again, I also know that I can go back in and add that highlight with my white gel pen. I'm going to move on from here to coloring the hair. I chose more of a blondish brunette color for my girl with Caucasian skin. And I chose a black with my darker skin tone. For the hair, it can be hard to kind of get around all of these objects that you have in there to get like a good highlight, low light in the hair. And the only thing I can tell you is you just want to use very little pressure and just the tip of your marker to do the flicking technique. And some people flick towards themselves, some people flick away from themselves. I would encourage you to practice on scrap paper to see which one works for you. I typically do better when I'm flicking away from myself, which is why I'm also a paper turner. Here up top, there's already some lines that are drawn there by the illustrator, and I'm just going to follow along with those as I continue out from my lightest to my darkest. I will try to conserve some of that highlight, but sometimes it's just going to come out a little bit darker because you don't have a lot of real estate, and that's okay. So back to this white gel pen. So several people had asked me about it and why mine looked brighter white than theirs. And what I have discovered in talking to them is that it seems that when they're having some issues with it drying back or taking on the color underneath it, a lot of times they're using watercolors, or they're using a like distress ink or distress oxide as a watercolor, and then they're putting it over top of it. There are times, even for me, that once it dries back, it is not as white. Typically not with my Copics though. When I use the white gel pen over Copics, I have not really had any issues with it drying back. So I'm not sure if there's some sort of property with them being reactive with water, the ink, like the distress inks or the watercolors, that causes the white gel pen to kind of absorb the color a little bit. But if you have a problem with that and your white gel pen isn't working or you want it to be a little bit bolder, there's a couple of different options. One is gouache, and that is just a opaque type of watercolor that you can use for highlights and things like that. It's pretty common. You can also use just white acrylic paint. I know, like, when I do my starry skies or when I do snowfall, I do typically use a little bit of watered down white acrylic paint. So I can see how it would be a little bit more difficult to get in there with a pen, or I'm sorry, with a brush versus a pen. But those are some other options. The other thing is you can put down a layer of your white gel pen and then let it dry back to whatever it's going to look like, and then put another layer on top of it. And that first layer should act as somewhat of a barrier. So anywho, now I'm out to the darkest color, and like I said, it can be very difficult to kind of get around all of the things that are going on, especially when you have a illustration that's set up the way this one is, where she's got all these flowers and all these layers of hair. It'll be much easier at the top to conserve that highlight than it will be at the bottom. But that's okay, because if you think about it in real life, when your hair is up or down, it looks different ways. It can look lighter, it can look darker, depending upon, how compact it is. And so I wouldn't stress too much about that, as long as everything looks like it goes together. Even here, I don't have much of a highlight down on the bottom of the hair that's around her face. I really have just a very minimal highlight. The other thing that you can do is, if it gets too dark and you aren't a fan of it, you can go in with your lightest color and that will remove some pigment. Or you can go in with a 0 marker, which is the colorless blender, and that will also remove some pigment. Onto the black hair. You're going to notice that there's a violet in there, and you're going to be like, Kelly, why are you putting purple in this person's hair? Why am I putting purple in their hair? Because black hair isn't gray. Black hair is not gray. And so it has to have some sort of base color before you go in there with these gray colors. You have to give it something else, a tone, either a warmth or a cool tone. If you wanted to do black hair and you wanted it to be a little bit warmer, I would recommend a warm brown, or a maybe not like a red. Though you could, that would work, but you would still be able to see the red. I prefer usually to do a violet or a blue, a darker blue. And I think that those are both really pretty options. It's going to look a little crazy now, but by the time we're done with it, it will look black. And again, we're trying to conserve that highlight, especially with darker hair, because that's what's going to give you any kind of look of a shine to the hair. So, yeah, this is a long video. It's a long video because there's so much to look at and discuss when, you're trying to color these things. I think both of these images are fabulous. I loved the sentiment. There's a couple of different ones in there, but I chose to go with "You Don't Look a Day Over Fabulous" because I thought that these would be really fantastic cards to like give your girlfriends. There is no like specific age on there. So especially, if they're getting older, I have a girl that I work with, and she keeps insisting that she's always turning 25. Like, she's like, I'm just always turning 25. That's what I'm doing. So for somebody like that in your life, I think a card like this is super fun. So I legitimately had to stop my voiceover so that I could have a enormous coughing fit because apparently my throat does not like that I am talking so much. The last week, I don't really know what's going on. The only symptom that I've had is a sore throat. I probably have like strep or something, knowing my luck. But it's just been, I woke up, I think last Saturday and had a little bit of a sore throat, and then it got progressively worse, and then it started getting better yesterday. So here's hoping that we're over the worst of it. But apparently, my body just really doesn't like me being chatty because I feel like I have to cough yet again. I honestly probably need a cough drop, but I feel like that would be super annoying to listen to during the voiceover. So I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to try to power through. So at this point, we're back out to the purple portion. And you can see that it doesn't really look purple. It just gives the hair that little bit of shine so that it looks black instead of gray. So now that both of those are done, we're going to start working on coloring the flowers. I'm going to show you a bunch of colors. Feel free to pause it if you need to write them down. These are all the colors I used for mapping out my colors. And this is something that I like to do, that if I watch my videos, when I have a lot going on. So when there's a lot of things going on and I'm going to be using a lot of different colors and I'm trying to figure out what's what and where things are going to go, I'd like to go in with my lightest color and just kind of fill the whole thing in so that I know when I'm coming back and doing my shading, I already know where I'm going and what is what. What's a leaf, what's a flower, what's a inside of the flower, and this just works for me. If you have a hard time making sense of images that look a little bit more complicated, try this. It's a really great way to just break it down and make it so it's not so overwhelming. With that said, be doing the shading the same way that I've been doing it, and we're going to kind of launch into story time. I know this is a longer video, just because of all the things that we were talking about with the skin tones. So if you are a person who is not a fan of story time, please feel free to turn down the volume and play your own music. If I try to play music, which I haven't tried to do in, I think, probably 5 years, people got mad that I wasn't talking. So here I am. The story time that we're going to be talking about today, actually I have been sitting on for quite some time, because I wasn't really ready to share it. You probably noticed it from the title, and have been waiting for me to be like, tell me what is going on. So here I am, telling you what is going on. So after we had Caitlin, and maybe even a little bit before, maybe when I was still pregnant with Caitlin, Eric and I had talked quite a bit about what our schedules were going to look like, especially with him switching positions and us working opposite shifts. Now we're, have 2 children instead of 1, and what that was going to look like for us. And ultimately, we decided, this was back in February. Now I say we because obviously we talked about it and made the decision together, but ultimately he left it up to me. He's like, whatever you want to do, we will make it work, which I absolutely adore him for. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I decided to quit my job-ish. So I basically, what I did is I switched my full and my part-time job. That's what I did. So I had gone in there in February. So I went back to work full-time after I had Caitlin. And then it just really, I mean, we're very blessed that we have family members to help us, but it's a lot. And our parents are older. And not that they still don't help us, they do. But they don't have to help quite as much because with me working 12-hour shifts, and in the beginning, Eric was on afternoon shift, and as you guys know, then he's moved to the detective bureau and he was working overtime. And so basically our moms were coming to fill in so that I wasn't always single momming it. They were coming in to fill in Eric's shoes so that like I could help Nathan with school and make dinner without Caitlin screaming at me all of the time. That has gotten a little bit better as she has gotten older. But there are still days where it is challenging because just kids are challenging, babies are challenging. And so I went in February and I told my supervisor, hey, look, I'm looking to go part-time, which if you remember years back when I started there, I was part-time because I had another full-time job. And so she was like, I totally understand, but can you finish out the pay period? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I have no issue. I've never, ever in my life quit a job without giving 2 weeks notice. And I knew that they were going to be shorthanded. So the very next day, she sends me a text message and is like, hey, can you stay until the end of March? And I was like, let me talk to Eric. I'll call you back and let you know. So after Eric and I talked, we didn't really know when he was going to move to the detective bureau. So it was supposed to be sometime in April. So I ended up calling them back and telling them that I could stay full-time until the end of April. And so this whole time I have known that I was going to be going part-time. But I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't ready to share that. Now, in the meantime, they've done a bunch of switching things around at work to kind of cover my shift. I've been leaving work early so that I could come home and help with Caitlin so Eric doesn't have to get up at the crack of dawn to get her where she needs to be. I also, this is interesting, the place that I work, if you don't work there for 15 years, they will not pay you for your sick time when you leave. So then I was like, well, now I have to get somebody to cover my sick time because I'm not giving them back the time. That's not going to happen. And so fortunately, one of the other part-timers was able to pick up the majority of it. But I was like, dude, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not giving you my time. And so it's just kind of been this back and forth and up and down and just kind of crazy. But as of April 22nd, I am now a full-time Cardmaker and a part-time dispatcher. And that's where we're at. Now, several people over the years have asked me, how do you make a living at this? And the reality of the situation is, I don't know. I don't know how you make a living at this. I've never done it. I can only do this because I have a wonderful, supportive husband who is willing to pick up the extra if I don't make it. I have a wonderful, supportive husband who has good health insurance for both of our children. I am not in a position where I'm doing this by myself. These are the only reason that I can do this thing and be at home with my children more. So even though I am still working, like I switched my part-time jobs, I'm still working. I'm just working from home now. So that way at 7 p.m., I wouldn't have to leave to go to work and have one of our mothers drive over to hang out with our kids. I will be here. And so I have to find a balance. And so the first 2 weeks, like the day my computer broke, this is so funny. The day my computer broke was literally week 1, day 1, that this was my full-time job. And then my computer broke. I told Eric, I was like, I hope that's not an omen. This is not good news. So speaking of the white gel pen, I'm going to go in here and just kind of bolster up some of the highlights. I'm also going to add a couple of details to like the flowers and things. And then the highlight that I lost in their lipstick, I'm going to put that back in, and I added a highlight to their earrings as well. So that's where we are. We're just heading on this, next adventure, and hopefully hopefully we're doing the right thing. I prayed about it for a really, really long time. And the deciding factor for me was when I was diagnosed with skin cancer. Because it was just kind of like, I had been praying about it and praying about it, and it was just kind of like this wake-up call that I needed. Like, your time is not promised to you, and if you have the opportunity to be at home and spend more time with your kids and have a more flexible schedule for the things that are going on in their lives, why are you not doing that? Like, you can't be so afraid of failure that you never move. And so here I am. Here I am, Lord, making this move, even though it is in fact terrifying. But that's where we're at. So, for this background here, I really wanted to be able to use the stripes in the background, and this particular stamp set is not an A2 size. It's just a smidge smaller, but I like getting more bang for my buck, and I like being able to stretch my supplies. So I stamped it. I could have lined up the stamps and done it that way to extend it out. I felt like this was easier for me. I understand it won't be easier for everybody, but it was easier for me. And I just got out my T-square ruler. I lined it up with the stripes. I went in with my Copic Safe pen and just kind of extended out those stripes. And then I just went in with my black Copic marker and filled it in. You can't tell the difference whatsoever on the card. They look exactly the same and totally blend in. I'm not worried about the center of the card because that's where my panel is going to go that has my colored images. I did trim these down so that you'd be able to see the equal amount of stripes on both sides, and I am going to pop them up on foam. These ones were one of the ones that I took to the store to sell, which I will tell you that my first week in the store, I sold 3 cards. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but for somebody who's never sold cards before, I'm going to take it as a win, and I'm going to be grateful that 3 people bought my cards, and hopefully they'll come back and buy some more. So once I get the foam tape off of there, which if you have the foam sheets, you could also cut that and put that behind it as well. But I have this big roll of the Scotch foam tape, and that's what I'm using. So I'm going to put that down on there, make sure everything is all lined up. I did have to wiggle a little bit, and then I'm going to firmly attach it, push it down so that everything is firmly attached. And I'm going to do that with both cards. And then, you know me, I love the shimmers. Can't get enough of the glitters. And so I'm going to go in with a clear shimmer pen and put that kind of just all over my flowers. And then I also put it on their lipstick, their earrings, and the reflection in the sunglasses. In order to add a little extra oomph to that reflection, I took my glossy accents, and I found that the easiest way to get this to go where I want it to is to outline whatever the object is I'm trying to fill, and then filling in the center. If you have any like air bubbles or anything like that, you can pop them very gently with a needle, and the area will fill in if you do it right away while it is still wet. And then that is pretty much it for both of these cards. So I hope that you learned something about how to shade with your Copics or with your alcohol markers, whatever you have. And I hope that you learned a little bit something about how the process doesn't change no matter what type of skin tone or hair that we're coloring. It's all the same, just with different results. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Wish me luck on my next big adventure, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.